But staying with the concept of culture, talk to me about culture back in the day,
Hmm.
when the banking days. I mean, the 2008 global financial crisis was a real kick up the pants for banking in particular.
It was.
So, did you experience a shift in the culture when you were there?
I suppose I did. I mean, certainly the public perception of banking
It got nasty,
in
didn't
all
it?
that was framed, rightly or wrongly, it got difficult, and certainly got difficult for our frontline staff. You know, the staff that were in bank branches took an awful lot of the brunt of that
Smart comments and all that kind of stuff.
public, public challenge, for want of a better word. Those of us that were sitting in offices behind the scenes probably less so, but it doesn't mean we didn't feel it. You know, we all felt something at that time, and certainly the culture was an aspect that did change and did shift at that time. But you know, be wrong of me to answer that question, Alan, without also covering 80-90% of everybody in banking, you know, before the crisis, during the crisis, and after the crisis, you know, did nothing else other than did a super job every day for customers.
Right, right.
You know, they didn't make all of the decisions that
Sure,
led to
sure.
the banking crisis. They weren't in charge of all of the
Decision making.
macro factors that happened in world economies, etc. And they didn't make all the credit decisions along the way on some of the big land banks that certainly caused some of the big holes that ultimately became part of NAMA. So be wrong of us to think that there was a culture in banking that was all about, you know, anti-customer or poor service to customer.
Sure.
90% of everybody in banking is very much the different, very much around delivering to the customer, managing, you know, the customer affairs to the best of their ability. And that was there before the crisis, after the crisis, and is still there today. So I have a lot of time for all of my colleagues
Yeah.
in banking. I have a lot of time for the cultures that we had in banking. But that's not to say there wasn't an element that could have been done differently and should have been done differently. For me, my time in banking, I loved every minute of it. I loved every minute of it. It did change a little for me towards the end, and it was culture that made me decide not to stay. You know, I made my decision in respect to Bank of Ireland at the time, predominantly driven by culture.
Right.
It just
What do you mean, Sean?
I think banking became a different business